Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to Better Life discussion. During our weekly episodes, we explore this intersection between spirituality and psychology, and as a result, we capture some interesting, if not timeless, wisdom contained in both fields. I want to thank you for joining today's talk about good and evil and everything in between. My name is Marcia Trajano, and with me is Peter Hayes, who joins me as we embark on this deep dive into one of the most fundamental questions. Humanity has this eternal question about what is good, what is evil, right? And Peter, for as long as we've had consciousness, I'm saying you, me, all of us members of the human race, we have wrestled with understanding and even defining the boundaries between those two forces from, I would like to say, maybe the innocence of the mythical Garden of Eden, where, if we think about it, morality didn't even exist at the time, to
Mm.
the more complex moral systems we now live by. This concept of good and evil has always been shaped by evolving social, spiritual, and psychological understanding. So, Peter, I hope to engage you in this conversation about the nature of morality, especially when we struggle with personal dilemmas that can have connotations of good and evil. And Peter, just a question for you for us to start. What are your thoughts about this topic? Can we together decode the duality of good and evil together?
Okay. Well, thank you, Marcia, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. The Spirit's book, in the third part, which talks about the divine laws of God, there's a section on it about good and evil. And the question is asked, what's the difference? Good is described as anything that contributes to the betterment of humanity, the progress of humanity, the nurturing of humanity. It is implied that what is good and pursuing the good is what helps people to help one another. And generally, I think the important thing is that it's sustainable.
Okay.
Evil is described as that which causes harm to humanity, disruption, chaos, and by its nature is unsustainable. So, good we can live with, so to speak, and flourish. But if we're only engaged in evil or in the bad, then it's unsustainable. Of course, we do live with both, don't we? I mean, um, from that creed and spiritism that emphasizes that we're born simple and ignorant,
Yes.
we are individuals that we, in the beginning, we may be given a pass, if you will, because we don't know any better. But human beings are unique from all other species on the planet in that we are capable of knowing what we're doing, and we're also capable of holding a grudge. We may have talked about this in the past, but the difference between humans and animals is that when animals are aggressive, they're aggressive as long as it takes to either get out of danger or hunt if they're in the act of hunting. And once they've gotten what they're trying to accomplish, they stop being aggressive. But we are quite capable of remaining aggressive for a long period of time. We're capable of holding grudges. We're capable of hatred. That, uh, which is, do animals hate? No, they act on instinct.
Mm.
So they can be violent. They can be very aggressive, but they don't hate. But we are quite capable of hating. And hatred is what? Intent. It's deliberate. Um,
And it's funny, if I may just add
yeah.
here, Peter, the
Hmm.
fact that the difference as we start talking about humanity versus animals in this case, and
Hmm.
how one is intelligence. There's this intelligence about this stage of development of humanity versus the instinctive nature of the behaviors of animals. But the other component besides intelligence is really awareness or self-awareness,
Hmm.
right? And I would say what marks us distinctly as human beings, the humanity within us, is the possibility for compassion, possibility for really living this emotional soup, if you will, of
Right.
goodness, of compassion, of and we don't have to talk now, but because I
Hmm.
interrupted your flow, but it would be interesting perhaps if we can discuss a little bit about the teachings of Jesus, for example, because over and over and over again, he teaches us about love thy enemy, right? About forgiveness, etc. But anyways, you
Oh.
were saying something regarding the animals and how once the threat is gone, the aggression's gone, right?
Mhm. Right. Once the threat is gone, animals don't stay aggressive per se. In other
Mm-hmm.
words,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like this. I remember an expert on sharks said that if you're in the water with a shark, it's always dangerous, of course,
Yeah.
but it's quite possible that if you're in the water with a shark, they may not do anything. Now, if they're hungry, that's another story.
Yeah.
It's not like all they want to do is kill.
Yeah.
So, um, but again, humans are quite capable of hanging on to grudges, hanging on to animosity and hatred, and we do use our intelligence in all kinds
Mm-hmm.
of elaborate ways to perpetuate these kinds of attitudes and feelings. To go back to what you were just saying about Jesus in stressing love thy enemies, what was the meaning of that? Should we love everyone equally? Do we love a stranger the same way we love our family members? No. Would we be expected to love somebody who hurt us and betrayed us?
Mm-hmm.
That's not very realistic. But when we talk about loving our enemies, we are talking about not seeking revenge on someone and not wanting
Absolutely.
ill will to happen to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
I love that because in on topic, right? So
Mhm.
Jesus really, as a master, and he taught us through parables and whatnot. But
Mhm.
he really brings the concept of overcoming evil
Mm.
by challenging perhaps a more traditional notion of the duality by just really suggesting that good and evil are not opposing equal forces. So to
Mhm.
me, there are all sorts of movies
Mhm.
drama, theater, whatever that comes to my mind is this eternal, if you will, theme of good versus evil, right? But
Right.
from the teachings of Jesus specifically, he does say no, we don't need to destroy evil. He teaches that in fact it's love, forgiveness, selflessness.
Mhm.
Those are the biggest weapons to
Mhm.
overcome evil, to overcome whatever source of um, pain that exists, right? So in the end, what we learn is that we do not need to resort to violence or hatred. In
Mhm.
fact, and another amazing person that I love to bring about, he's my hero, is Nelson Mandela, right? When he brought the reconciliation
Mhm.
trials for those that inflicted pain to face their victims.
Mhm.
And through that face to face choice of forgiveness, then there was reconciliation, and then there was healing to an entire nation that suffered so much. But, anyways, when
Yeah.
I think about it, the other aspect that I think about it, Peter, here is the zero sum game, right? Which is a dynamic, traditional dynamic that good versus evil is that zero sum game where if I win, you lose, and vice versa, right? And Jesus says, nah, you can be evil, but I'm going to love you. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be compassionate. And with doing that, I will dispel whatever's triggering you to create this whatever conflicting aspects. I just thought is just amazing what he does, right?
I think part of it is we always have a choice. And if
Uh-huh.
somebody next to us behaves badly, even if they harm us in some way or they
Yeah.
mistreat us, are we going to drag ourselves down to their level by reciprocating the same way they are?
And we
And I'll
do
go,
it, right? We do it, even
sure.
if not by violence
Mhm.
or physicality, right? A physical act, but we may hold on to that in our memories, in our resentment, in a desire to, if not seeking revenge, as you mentioned before,
Yeah.
but really revel in your fall, the other, right? The
Yeah.
other person's fall when it's like, ah, I knew it. And I'm joking here, but it's really hard to to be the bigger person,
Yeah.
to not focus on the eye for an eye or tooth for tooth, right?
Mhm.
To to be able to love and pray and wish well,
Mhm.
especially those that we consider our enemies. And what we mean by that is anyone that is not supporting your ideology, your family, your desires, anybody that is against that self-centered view of what is life, what is the world according to, in this case, Marcia or Peter, but then anyone is potentially my enemy because anyone can be the other, right? The
I
one
mean,
that's
you
not
could argue,
totally, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
you could argue that anybody that doesn't agree with our point of
Yeah,
view,
yeah,
who, we that suddenly we have an excuse to hate them, which is
yeah,
just
yeah,
delusional. I mean,
yeah,
it's just how does one describe the um, the short-sightedness of that point of view?
yeah.
I think it's the book Christian Agenda from
Mm.
Andre Louise that there's a line in there I really like that says, what is it? Allow the other person to conceive the world as freely as you do. So, part of what that means is, yes, somebody may have a perspective that we really don't agree with, and maybe it can upset us, but do we have to hate them for it?
Yeah,
I mean, really?
yeah,
Or would it be more productive to understand why that person thinks that way? Where are they really coming from? Are they
yeah,
100% wrong?
yeah,
Who says that we are 100% right?
yeah,
We don't. How could we presume that?
yeah,
So when Jesus talks about loving our enemies, that's another way to think about it. I mean, there's lots of ways to understand what he's saying there. And I was thinking when a moment ago as you were talking, did you ever see the movie Papillon with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman?
yes, as a long time ago.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Um, I mention it because I once saw, I think it was a DVD version, and so they had
uh-huh.
extra stuff at the end.
Yes,
And they had a short film about the making of it, and they had the person who the story was based on, a prisoner who was in Devil's Island and was trying to escape. Very
Yeah.
briefly, it's a movie about Steve McQueen is a person who is sentenced to Devil's Island, which is off the coast of Africa, I think, part of the French
Mm.
colony. And it's a very brutal place, and he keeps trying to escape, and he's very determined to do so. And I mention this because the person that the story was based on is interviewed in this extra documentary that's added on. And he said something I'll never forget. He said the purpose of prisons like this is for society to get revenge.
Hmm.
So there was no pretense that if somebody goes to a jail, it's for them to answer, yes, to answer for their crimes, and maybe they'll learn a lesson or be reformed.
Yeah.
No, it's to torture them
Yeah.
as much as for as long as possible.
To
And this is,
extricate, right, Peter?
yeah, yes,
Extricate the power or control that person once had. Of
right.
course, usually we assume that the person who goes to prison has inflicted some harm or has um, disobeyed whatever. But I think it's quite interesting because those individuals lose everything, including their own sense of self, usually, right?
Yes, often. I mean, somebody who's locked up in solitary confinement.
Ugh,
I mean, can you imagine what life in a supermax prison does to most people if you're
I
truly
I
not?
I would not survive. I can tell you.
And there's, should people be held accountable? Of course. So,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the difference between holding people accountable versus I'm going to punish you and you deserve to be punished a
Yeah.
lot. Um, does that make us any better? There's that old saying that sometimes the difference between I mean, forgive me for saying this, but it's a comment that's been made. Like sometimes the difference between the prisoners and the guards is the
Yeah.
rate of pay. That's assuming you're in a prison where the guards are truly mistreating the prisoners and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
flaunting their power over people like that. Obviously, not all prison guards are like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean to suggest anything of the sort, but this need to, or impulse, I should say, to get revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Not only can it just go on and on and on, but it traps us.
Yes.
So when we talk about the inability to forgive,
Yeah.
are we perpetuating evil in that way? Um, One could make the argument, the Spirit's book, going back to that section I mentioned before, part 3 of the Spirit's book, which talks about divine laws. I think one of the questions is if if I'm paraphrasing this a lot, but if I've been mistreated and I
Mm-hmm.
feel the temptation to get even or carry out advice in return, you know, is that somehow justified or understandable?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, of course not. We have to rise above that impulse to just go after somebody who's caused harm.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I pivot a little bit, if you don't mind? Because that's very interesting what you're bringing here. But if we switch a little bit, Peter, because emotions, right?
mhm,
As we mentioned, self-awareness is what makes humans, but also the entire emotional landscape. And within that landscape, we find emotions such as, oh, guilt or shame,
mhm,
and those emotions may play into how we perceive or even define what good or evil is, right?
mhm,
So I imagine here that they play quite a significant role when we start to see maybe internal signals to to tell us, hey, something is
mhm,
wrong here. there's some discretion of some sort,
Right.
or my moral compass is no longer pointing north but going elsewhere. So we need
Mhm.
to make a course correction.
Right.
But I'm wondering if guilt may be triggering
Mhm.
when we feel that we have violated our own moral code, right? Or
Mhm.
perhaps I intentionally or not, but I have harmed someone else. And what do we do? Do we seek forgiveness, redemption,
Mhm.
correction, reparations, or we keep at bay as guilt? But then there's also a question of shame, right? Which is um, leading perhaps the sense of atonement, right? Of I'm ashamed because I'm now been judged. I've been caught in the act, and I've been judged by society, by others, and I need to feel good again.
Mhm.
But I am now back to Papillon, right? The
Right.
idea of being socially rejected, condemned, imprisoned. So it's very interesting how all of those emotions um, they come to the forefront of this discussion as well.
Mhm. Well, thank God we have a conscience
Yes,
because it's
true.
what helps us to evolve.
Yeah.
And guilt is one part of having a conscience.
Hmm.
Uh, guilt can be that wake up call that gets us to think twice about
Hmm.
something we've been doing or impulses that we have or whatever.
Hmm.
But here's a question. Are we expected to just remain in a state of guilt?
Ah, no.
No.
What a waste, right? What a
Yeah,
waste it would
right.
be.
Guilt is an emotion that if it gets us to wake up, wonderful. If it expands our consciousness, great.
Hmm.
But it's also a passing emotion to the extent that if we really feel badly about something, then we will make the change and we won't repeat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if we do repeat it, we understand that we, fell short and we try again not to repeat it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you were talking about consciousness, right? And
Mhm.
maybe here, Peter, we can explore a little bit about the idea perhaps that evil is a construct of human consciousness, or is
Mm.
it something that exists independent of who we are? What are your thoughts? Have you thought about it, right?
Um, I think that going back to the idea that we're born simple and ignorant,
Sure.
when we're in that early primitive state, we're more animal like.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have these impulses. We're quite capable of being compassionate,
Yeah.
loving, kind. We're also quite capable of being violent and deliberately abusive and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as we evolve, then we begin to um, make different decisions about how aware we are of what we're doing.
Correct.
Um, if you could repeat your question again.
I was just thinking, this is flight of fancy from Marcia, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's a good one.
the notion, perhaps, and I'd love to uh, decode this notion with you, because
Right.
there may be no right or wrong answer, by the
Hmm.
way. But the idea that is evil a construct of
Hmm.
our human consciousness, or if
Mm.
not, does it exist independent of ourselves, our consciousness?
I think it's
And
always been there and
yeah.
it's part of our nature. And
Hmm.
actually, I could ask another question, which I think is another way to explore this topic.
Mm,
As we evolve spiritually and we
Yeah.
try to do what's good, are we supposed to eradicate evil? Is that realistic?
It's a very interesting perspective, right?
Mhm.
Because then it brings the idea just to answer, right?
Mhm.
Uh, can we maybe even put in my words, my simpler words,
Yeah,
can we as a society unlearn, and I'm putting air quote here, right? Unlearn evil or even transform it over time into good
right,
and I would say going back and maybe even repeating myself, that would require a deep sense of self transformation, personal
mhm,
growth,
right,
and change even on your mindset. So if you were to perhaps, Peter, think in terms of I don't know, spiritual thinkers or philosophers or even
right,
some religious traditions, they do emphasize that, right? The possibility of redemption. But how does it mean to us? And do we believe that evil can be eradicated, right?
mm,
And we, if we start to pepper the concept with ideas that are deeply contained, for example, in Spiritism, which includes free will,
mhm,
or even the role of suffering,
right,
how through suffering we actually grow, or even another concept perhaps is the idea of duality, right, where both good and evil are part of who we are.
right,
We start to get into a sense of no, right, evil can be just a temporary state
mhm,
that is exists with us, but ultimately we need to integrate, right?
right,
And I love, for example, when you start talking about the concept brought forth by Jung for around individuation or
mhm,
around integration of
mhm,
the shadow, then we start to get into the core of this discussion, which is some traditions where they put starkly polarized evil, darkness, right? And good as the light, as the better, etc. And
mhm,
they are irreconcilable. Irreconcilable, they cannot live together. And we know when we start to talk about shadow work, when we start to talk about individuation, the light comes, or consciousness, which you mentioned before, consciousness
mhm,
arises exactly from
mhm,
allowing us to peek inside, right? To just take a peek inside of ourselves and
mhm,
see, whoop, I don't know that this is really good of me. Let's explore that. Let's
mhm,
bring light into that shadow and forgive myself, but work with what I have today.
right. I don't know that evil is outside of ourselves, to go back
Mm-hmm.
to what I understood of
Mm-hmm.
your question.
Yeah.
I do think it's part of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Yeah.
um, part of it is we learn to have a sense of balance so that we would not, I mean, I'll just put it in very simple terms.
Uh-huh.
Even though we may have the intelligence to figure out how to rob a bank, we wouldn't do it.
Yes.
We have reached a point where we simply would not make those kinds of choices. There's lots of
Yeah.
behaviors that we would very easily avoid doing, even if we're quite capable of thinking through how we might do such a thing. Um, so there's that. And maybe when we evolve a great deal, much more than where we are now, um, I don't know even then if we've eradicated evil, but that doesn't mean it would play any part of our lives. I mean, when Spiritism
Yeah.
talks about a pure spirit, a more advanced spirits, presumably these are spirits that would never carry out an evil act, certainly.
Hmm.
Uh, what about even just slight impulses of anger or anything that might at a lower level lead to evil?
Yeah.
I imagine that spirits that are much more evolved than we are don't
Hmm.
don't feel that at all.
Yeah.
But does that mean evil is eradicated? Well, maybe, maybe so. At our level, we're doing quite well just to find as much balance as possible so that if we do have moments of anger, for instance, or somebody doesn't treat us well, we have a lot of ways of responding to that that
Yeah.
don't immediately result in some kind of deliberately hostile, callous act.
Yeah.
I
And yet this discussion is it has followed us, right?
Mhm,
As we evolve for a
mhm,
long time. And there is Jonah DeAngelis brings the idea, she references Manichaeism, right? So
yeah,
it's an
yeah,
ancient philosophy that really brings that concept of light versus darkness, that duality
mhm,
that shapes the way that individuals will act. So
mhm,
in that this concept has shaped, if you will, how everyone, and I'm saying this and I'm thinking to the what we already discussed, which is guilt and shame, right? But
mhm,
anyways, the that philosophy really framed, structurally speaking, how everyone lived, because you you were subject to this constant um, battle between those forces within you, and those who were followers of that philosophy, they
mhm,
believed that either they would be in, you know, good or light, or evil, dark.
mhm, right,
Therefore, you could not be both. You had to decide where you're going to be, and
mhm,
if they didn't, they would, not get to the ultimate salvation that we all want. And it's very interesting because, Peter, if you think about it, right, what could we consider today as, if we were Manichaeist, right? If we were those, what we would consider as good, as light, and maybe we could think, well, if I am charitable, if I am pure, if I'm righteous person, versus the evil or bad person
mhm,
who is greedy, selfish,
mhm,
violent, etc.
right,
And then, oh, Peter, you gotta know that I'm thinking Star Wars here, right? The Empire, right? The Jedi was light versus the Empire, and this dualistic struggle between the two, which could be a rather modern, right? Even though it was in the, I believe, in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when the trilogy first started.
first started, yeah,
But they really brought that quite beautifully, cinematically so, to
mhm,
all of us to look at it, and the struggle, why the hero, why the boy Luke, right? Why did he have to go against an entire empire and win? And what are the mentors that will help this boy to fight? But it's just quite beautiful if you think about it, as we discuss it. Let's take a moment to think about it. What do we believe? Is it external? Is it internal? And if it's not either internal, external, but if it exists within us, the both sides, the duality within us, what
Mhm.
does it mean, and how can I perhaps forgive myself? And as I just finish this thought process here, I would
Mhm.
like to perhaps pivot to Christianity, right?
Mhm.
Because Christianity differs from many different religions or even philosophical traditions because it brings to us
Mhm.
this beautiful, transformative power of grace, right? And
Mhm.
the idea that you can overcome evil. Evil, as a matter of fact, is something
Right.
that's quite temporary. It's elusive, even, right?
Mhm.
Because God, merciful God, forgiving God, will overcome evil. And then we get to that, the sense of external, right? Peter. It
Mhm.
was all about Adam and Eve, right? The first sin. If they didn't, I wouldn't be a sinner, which is again goes back to the whole discussion. Is it internal? Is it external? And if
Mhm.
it's
Okay.
internal, can we live with those
Mhm.
sides of us that fail, that sins, that would not be as pure as we would like to be?
When I think of Adam and Eve, one of the questions I often ask is
Yeah,
this so-called paradise,
yeah,
was it ever realistic to begin with? I mean, was it sustainable to begin with? And I think the answer is no.
yeah.
Um, Going back to light and darkness, we do have both. I don't think it's either or. But
Hmm.
at the same time, what is the natural state of things and what is sustainable? Light.
Yeah,
Light is capable of lasting in perpetuity.
yeah,
And is it the state of things? Is it really light being covered by darkness? It's the absence of light, or is darkness the natural state of things? I don't think
mhm,
darkness is the natural state of things because, as you mentioned before, we do have free will.
yeah,
And
yeah,
as our conscience develops, we are given this beautiful capacity
yeah,
to navigate our free will so that we can make choices. Is evil inevitable, unavoidable, a permanent state of things? Why? Why does it have to be?
why does it have to be? That's a good point, right?
Mhm.
And our lives just this linear narrative where, right, I don't grow. I am what I am, and I don't grow.
Because we choose to have that attitude.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
maybe we don't have as much consciousness as we will need,
yeah.
but
Not yet.
when we
Not yet.
not
Yeah.
yet, not yet, but that's the key, not
Uh-huh.
yet.
Uh-huh.
Uh, in the Spiritism Talk series, uh, there was a recent episode which the United States Spiritist Federation does,
Uh-huh.
and Joao Korngold was talking about uh, a concept in Spiritism that it stresses a lot, which is the development of intelligence versus the development of morality. And often our
Mhm.
intelligence charges ahead of morality. Well, in some ways, it's easier to develop our intelligence than it is our morality, because
Yes.
as he was mentioning, as Joao was mentioning, morality requires perseverance, a willingness to avoid certain impulses that maybe we're struggling with at the moment, so that hopefully, God willing, we get to a point where we don't have those impulses to engage in some kind of behavior that would be detrimental. And so, yeah, we have to use our will at times. Ideally, we get to a point later on where we just instinctively would not engage in certain behaviors that are harmful or destructive in some way. Um, so, part of what I'm trying to say here is when Spiritism talks about the balance, or the often not a balance, but trying to balance intelligence and morality. When intelligence is way, way ahead of morality, that can be destabilizing and dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah,
After all, there are
absolutely.
many psychopathic criminals out there who are very smart.
Yeah.
Um, and so evil, unfortunately, is perpetrated, can be perpetrated by people who are very smart and very clever. Um, but at the same time, when Jesus on the cross says, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do," that means a lot of things. But one thing it could mean is those who are very smart who misuse the gifts that they have,
Yeah.
because they either lack morality, or they simply, or they know the difference between right and wrong, and they just simply don't care.
Yeah, but remember, you mentioned a couple of times the tenet from Spiritism that
Mhm.
says that humans, right,
Yeah.
mankind begins its journey toward that individuation and become a pure spirit.
Hmm.
They begin simple and ignorant, and ignorant to me is just another word for unaware, or as Jesus says, they don't know what they're doing. They really
Yeah.
they us, right? We don't know yet what we do, but with our experiences we will. And I wonder here, if I could just take a moment to talk a little bit about the idea that what we classify, what we deem to be evil
Hmm.
today, in this moment, in this society, uh, on one hand, may not be evil tomorrow, but on the other hand, may actually lead to a lot of growth, and even spiritual awakening, right? So it's important for us to rethink even what we call it evil, and a lot of what we know as such is really based on cultural and societal norms, right?
It can.
And right, so it's important for us to also take that into consideration. What one society or subgroup or a group of individuals, for whatever reason, that they are in this bubble as a solid group, less and less we see less and less of that, right? But what one may see as good, the other one may see as terrible, as evil, and there
Mhm.
are even drastic consequences of that. So for example, if I think about it, Peter, capital punishment,
Right.
available and even seen as a good thing to stop somebody who's a criminal, a serial killer, whatever, whatever. But
Hmm.
in many, many, many countries, it is considered a cruel and immoral form of punishment,
Right.
right? I could even call it a chapter in the history of Western society, where through imperialism and colonialism,
Hmm.
historically those countries, and we're talking about England, we're talking about France, we're talking about Portugal and Spain, for
Right.
example, they dominated, they controlled other peoples, and in their pursuit of colonializing, if you will,
Hmm.
part of their thinking was they were bringing civilization to that group of people that lived, inhabited those countries that
Hmm.
were considered primitive, right? The natives of those countries. So,
Right.
from one hand, we have, oh, I'm civilizing you. group
Hmm.
that lives in this island or whatever. And for the group, it is complete evil because they're coming a foreign race to completely destroy everything about them. And this is just one of or two examples, and we could go on and on and on about the relative notion of what is and what is not. But I think that maybe we can, because I see we're at the very end of our time,
Okay.
and it's just beautiful how time flies when we're talking, right? But maybe we can close here with that idea of what is and what is not good and evil. Is there an example, Peter, that you'd like to bring before we close?
Well, the idea that certain actions are carried out within a culture where it might be considered acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is something we can talk about more in the future because it's a complex subject.
Yes.
Um, Generally speaking, is it ever okay to kill other people, especially if there's not an imminent threat? Um, so, if one country decides to engage in behaviors that lead to people being slaughtered, is there some justification for that based on a cultural perspective?
Mm-hmm.
I would say not likely. Um, Even if people think they're right in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Again, this is maybe something we could talk about more in the future,
Absolutely.
but it's it's very. I think people can very easily delude themselves into thinking that they're right, and therefore they are given permission to carry out behaviors that do lead to others being harmed,
Yeah.
presumably because it's for their own good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do the perpetrators really know that? And are they rationalizing what they're doing in the name of progress?
Yeah.
Um, it kind of goes back to that question of what is truly permissible in God's eyes. We can rationalize why we do certain things, which one group of people would say that's clearly evil, and another group would say, no, it's okay. It's all right.
Totally acceptable. Yes.
Totally acceptable. Might makes right if that's what the argument is. Um, but what is permissible under God's eyes? When we go back to what it means to have a conscience, what are the real consequences that we have to live with if we uh, do cause harm to others, but we somehow believe it's for the betterment of humanity in the long run? Well, that again, it's hard to summarize that in just a few moments, but it gets into a lot of murky areas in terms of how we might rationalize the treatment of others,
Yes.
either in the name of culture, in the name of progress, in the name of what we think humanity needs at this point to evolve, and that sort of thing. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important for us to take our discussion today as just a guideline for reflections, self reflections. What do I think? What do I feel? How do I treat myself and the others? And I just want to say, as we conclude here today, Peter, that as we've explored those concepts of good and evil, we start to see they're far from black and white, right? They are, in
yes.
fact, deeply intertwined with our choices, our consciousness, as you put it, our
Hmm.
world around us, those norms that are given to us that we inherited. But
Hmm.
perhaps the most powerful takeaway for me is that within this duality, there's always room for growth. There's
Hmm.
always room for perhaps seeking understanding, for transformation, and that by embracing the ideas, the concepts of love, empathy, self awareness, we all can indeed navigate the complexities of good and evil with perhaps a little bit more clarity and compassion.
Hmm.
And maybe what we need to think about it here is that the journey from our mistakes, right? Because we all make mistakes,
Right.
is to get to making better choices or less mistakes,
Hmm.
and maybe even, Peter, to get to a sense that we can contribute to the world becoming a better place for everyone,
Well,
right?
from the perspective of being immortal spirits,
Yeah,
I think you could say there's really no such thing as a permanent mistake. In other words, if we make a mistake, we're not condemned forever and ever as a result of that action.
yeah,
There
yeah,
will be an opportunity for us to do better.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And I would say for everyone here, let's also remember that in the end, all said and done, it is really our actions, when they're guided by a sense of wisdom and love, that will truly define what is good, right? It's our intentionality. It is our desire for the goodness, and I know it's hard to say goodbye, but we did come to an end to our time together, and I just want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us today, and I do hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own journey. And I would say until next time, let's stay curious, let's stay kind, let us all seek light. For those of you who tuned in for the first time, the Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna De Angelis, and we do hope to be able to provide an opportunity to juxtapose concepts of spirituality and psychology, and with that, understand both a little bit better. I want to say thank you, Peter, very much for being here with us. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. We'll be back next week with a new episode. And until then, please take care and keep embracing this journey that is called humanity. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye, everybody.